On behalf of Kalinga Literature Festival, I welcome you all today's talk. Today we have a very special guest, Mr. Keshava Guha. He's an author, editor, and essayist. His debut novel is Accidental Magic, which was published in 2019 from HarperCollins. Today we are going to talk about the book, about the scene in publishing world, and few other aspects. So welcome, Kesav.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you, Atul.
Well,
Thank you also to Rashmi Ranjan
thank
and the
you.
team from KLF.
Yeah, yeah, glad to see you. So the first question is about the book. Can you please tell the participants about the book? How did you plan about it?
Absolutely,
How
absolutely.
how you put up the how you put up the characters and the places?
Yeah. So this book, which came out last year, was in a way many years in the making. So the book is principally set in the U.S. in Boston, and I was in the U.S. as an undergraduate for 4 years in the late 2000s, and when I was in the US, I had the idea for a book about these two characters who you actually see in this book. Probably the two main characters in the book. These two men called Kannan, who's a software engineer from Bangalore, and Curtis Grimmett, who is a middle-aged radio host in Boston. And these two characters came to me individually, you could say. Like I just these people, all fiction writers will be familiar with this. A person can just appear to you, a fictional person, right? And you don't know where they've come from, but it happens. And I knew a little bit about them. I knew that one of them was this young man from Bangalore who's a very lonely software engineer. The other one was this chap in his mid 50s. And what connected them was loneliness. They were people who were isolated, in a way, cut off from society. And the question that I had for myself was, how could these two people be in the same novel? Because in America, like in India, society is very stratified, almost segregated. People tend to cluster with others from a similar background, right? So Indians in America, their social lives tend to be with fellow Indians. In fact, even further on, like if you're a Telugu person in America, you probably know a lot of other Telugus. And the other thing is that people very rarely form friendships across generations. So I was asking myself, how could these two people be in the same novel? And then I remembered something from my childhood, which was not just Harry Potter, which we all grew up with, but this world of online Harry Potter fandom. So Harry Potter became popular at the same time when the internet was taking off. And younger people today, as in people who are under 25, may not know about this internet, which is there was no social media. So the internet had these communities that
Yeah,
were basically fan communities. It might be people who are fans of Star Wars, or people who are fans of Star Trek, or people who are fans of Manchester United, whatever. And one of the biggest was Harry Potter, and it wasn't just children; it was grown-ups. And what appealed to me about that world of the online Harry Potter fan community was that you could, through Harry Potter, form an unlikely friendship. Somebody who was a young software engineer from Bangalore could actually meet somebody who was 30 years older, who was a white American, because they would bond over this shared link. And then after this occurred to me, then the big novel began to take shape. Then the two other main characters, two women, Rebecca and Malti, also came to me. But that was really the idea. It was, here are these two people, and normally they would never meet, their lives would never intersect, but I wanted to write a book in which their lives did intersect, and Harry Potter provided that link, that bridge. Now, the last thing I'll say about this, Atul, is that the book is not really about, and you will know this having read the book is not really about Harry Potter or even about Harry Potter fandom. It's about these characters, and Harry Potter is what serves as the link. Yeah. Sorry, are you not able to hear me?
uh, Yeah. Yeah, now I can hear you. Please,
Yeah, yeah.
can you please complete? Yeah, yeah.
No, that's my answer. Yeah, I've given my answer.
Yeah, yeah. Keshav, you greatly reflected on virtual world much before COVID struck the world, and
Right.
you, at least to me, you have appeared prophetic in that manner. So,
Yeah.
what, I would like to know exactly how did you figure out the whole method to write this particular kind of book in a particular kind of setup? You mean making an online community,
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
was it like an existential experiment for few concerned characters?
So you know, it's a great question. Atul. Look, I wasn't prophetic because this communities like this actually did exist, right? Now, what is the way in which the book I think is similar to the world we're living in right now is that most of the action of the book takes place with the characters in their own homes, communicating with each other virtually. So they actually don't meet all that all that often. I mean, Curtis and Kannan meet fairly often, but other than that,
Yeah.
they're mostly communicating online. And now, of course, the difference is big difference is a technological one. Is that there was no Skype, there was no Zoom, there was no StreamYard 20 years ago. So they were communicating by emails and in fan forums.
Orkut. There was an
Orkut.
Orkut.
Yeah, exactly.
There was
Orkut,
Orkut.
exactly. Orkut, exactly. And
Mm.
this it's the same. The idea is the same one that it's about being cut off from society. So Kannan is an engineer in Boston. He doesn't know anybody. He doesn't have any friends, and he's totally adrift. He's totally cut off. He's totally isolated. The virtual world is the only way that he can actually find any meaning, any community. The other thing, and I think there was a reviewer of the book in Scroll who I think really picked this up, which is that what happens for Kannan in particular, and maybe to an extent for Grimmett, is that their being so embedded in the virtual world makes it more difficult for them to live in the real world. So what happens in the novel, right, is that Kannan's parents want him to get married. But when you marry someone, you have to have a non-virtual relationship with them. You have to actually spend all of your time with them, right? You And that is not something that he's actually prepared for because the only kind of world that he knows how to live in is the virtual world, is the world where he hides behind a pseudonym, the world where he is constituted by his relationship to Harry Potter, not by his other aspects of his personality. So yeah, so I don't think I was prophetic, but I do think you're right that COVID has many of the aspects of the world I was describing 20 years ago in this book are now coming back with COVID. Yeah.
That was the peak of globalization because you have dealt
Hmm.
with something in early last decade. Uh,
Hmm.
I will second Jatir Rao's comment on your book because you
Yeah.
have rightly mentioned about his scroll review.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah. Yeah.
fantastic review, very positive review. He has written somewhere that Keshava has great sense of imagination.
Hmm.
I completely agree with him. Second point is that I'm proposing that I also found somewhere a hard realism in your narrative
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because you said and your characters displayed a certain kind of behavior where they did not have time to live in the real world, and
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
quite a common case even in today's time. We
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
people in metro, they are on their mobiles, they are reading different kind of books, not
Yeah.
the books which bother us to read or
Yeah.
not. So, what exactly do you see the future of that trend? Is it going
Yeah.
to stay here, or
It's a great question, Atul. So I don't know how history is going to regard this period, but from where we are right now, I think that what we're really seeing is that technological advancements are not always good, right? So
Yes.
the the classic theory of economic growth, the solo growth model, right, held that
Yeah.
growth in the economic growth in the long term only comes from technological advancement. It's the only long
Yeah.
term source of economic growth.
Mhm.
But if you look at, I mean, you and I both live in Delhi, right? Delhi is a city that has become made unlivable by
Yeah.
unchecked
November,
construction.
December, especially. Yes.
Exactly, right.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
where I'm strapped inside at home with the air purifiers on because I can't go outside, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and that's an entirely man-made problem, entirely.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that smartphone addiction and social media addiction are also man-made problems. I don't take the optimistic view that some people take of, oh, it's democratization and
Yeah.
all of that. The early internet did have that. So if you think of something like
Yes.
search engines,
Mm-hmm.
email, Wikipedia, absolutely are democratizing. But
Basic access to internet. Basic is
yeah,
required, very much required.
absolutely,
But
absolutely,
but
absolutely.
now we have unfiltered inflow of information to our
Yeah,
lives,
yeah,
and most of the times we don't need such information. That's the reality. Somewhere
absolutely.
I think we can relate it with the with Marx's theory of alienation,
Yeah,
which was the byproduct of heavy industrialization in the Western world.
absolutely.
And quite similarly, things are stepping up even in today's time.
Yeah.
I
And
wanted to know. I was very curious to know. Yeah,
one more
yes,
comment. One more comment on that. I just want to comment on the implications for fiction, right?
yes, yes,
Fiction is
yes,
the absolute antithesis of smartphones and social media because fiction is slow.
yes,
It requires
yes,
total immersion in a world, and it requires you to really have apply intense concentration. And
exactly.
it's if you're spending all day on your smartphone, you will not be able to really read a novel the way that you should or the way that you could earlier, and
Yes,
that is really scary. I mean,
yes,
from I think the what we're doing, the kind of cultural damage we risk doing is very, very serious. Yeah,
yes.
yeah,
Yes, right. And this is having a negative toll on the leadership, overall leadership, and the span of attention is very low. People keep shifting their minds from one thing to another.
yeah,
From
yeah,
South Africa, a match is going on in South Africa to something bad is happening in our part of the world,
yeah,
because people can't concentrate on any single subject for long time. This
yeah,
is
yeah.
really something scary. I was very curious to know about one particular thing. What what uh, what prompts you to write in general? Because you are also a publisher at daytime, and
Sure.
being a publisher means being an editor means you work in the background. Sometimes you deal with so many books at the same time, not
Yeah,
one book.
yeah.
So how do you get the time? But I'm sure that you had written this novel before you turned up as an editor.
That's
Then
right.
you
That's
were
right.
not an editor when you had written this book. But now I want to know because you are writing the second one.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the very simple answer to your question is that I am a part-time employee at Juggernaut. So I'm almost more of a consultant because I work on 5 or 6 novels a year,
Yeah.
which is not very much. And
Yeah.
so I have a half-time job, and half my time is dedicated to my own writing, and half my time is dedicated to my work as an editor. And even as an editor, the most of the books that I publish are translations from Indian languages. So the nature of the job there is very much about choosing the books, but then I think the most important aspect of it actually is the publishing aspect of marketing, getting the word out, getting people to know about this book because it's a book that's already been published in Hindi or Bengali or Tamil or any other language. And
Yeah.
so with a book that's already been published, the job of the editor is you don't do as much editorial work, right? So when a book is written in English, there'll be a process of rewriting and revision, but in this case, the book has already been published. So the main job, as I see it, is actually the marketing and making sure the book finds its audience. I'm still trying to understand in my own head how to combine the different jobs. I've been doing it for about a year,
Yeah.
but we'll see. But I would say that, writing is something I've been doing much longer. And as you know, I write journalism and essays as well. Uh, so that to me is the primary job, and this is more of a kind of consulting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what matters most for you, be it narrative or the character, or both,
Yeah.
and in what proportion?
Sure. So, uh, let me start by saying that I'm a reader before I'm a writer, right? So, like all of us, we read books
Yes.
first, and that's kind of still the most important thing for me.
Yes.
So character definitely matters more than anything else. But a close second is just language, the aesthetic appeal of language. And I would also add to that I'm interested in fiction as a vehicle for ideas as well, right? Fiction as a way to. So let's take this book. One of the topics in this book is friendship. What does it mean for two people to be friends? What is a friendship across generations like? What is a friendship across cultures like? Are some people not capable of friendship? What happens when your friend behaves in an unethical way? So these kinds of philosophical questions are also something that I'm interested in. Sorry, is Atul on the call? There you are.
Sorry, there was a disruption. Oh, I'm back.
You're back.
Keshava, the next question is: do you keep the readers in mind while writing? Or do you write for invisible readers?
Yeah. So you do, I do, and I don't. I mean, I am the first reader, right? So my first question with a sentence or a word is, do I think this is the right word or the right? Does the sentence sound right? Let me talk about this. In the case of this book, the book is
Yeah.
set partly in America, partly in India. It has two American characters, two Indian characters.
Yeah.
What I cared about was I wanted the American characters to be credible and believable for an American reader, and I wanted the Indian characters to be credible and believable for an Indian reader. That was important to me. The Indian characters are both South Indian, they're both Tamil, and there are some cultural details that probably Tamil readers or South Indian readers will
Yes.
understand more.
Yeah.
But I don't have a particular reader in mind. The main thing, the main way I think about the reader is I really trust and respect the reader. So I don't look to make things very simple or very clear or over clear for the reader. I don't like to make things obvious for the reader. To take one example, this book has an ambiguous ending in the sense that one of the characters, Malti, and I won't ruin anything here, when the book ends, you don't know what's going to happen to her. There's an open question about what her future is going to look like. And I trust the individual reader to make up their own minds. Some readers take one conclusion, some readers take a different conclusion. So one of the, more than almost any other art form, literature, fiction is a collaboration between the writer and the reader. The book that you read, Atul, may not be the same as a book that somebody else reads, in the sense that you'll both read my novel, but the conclusions you come to are very different. The way you see the way you see the characters are different. The assumptions you make are different. So
Right.
I believe in just trusting the reader and trying to give them space as well to write the book in a way along with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but certainly you don't attempt to make your book a bestseller before finishing it. I'm sure for that. Because
No, no,
you don't want to see your book being read in metro or in train
no. I
or
do, I do.
being sold.
But I don't expect it.
You
I would love it. I would
you
love if
do.
it happened. I don't expect
Yes.
it.
No,
Yeah,
no, I wanted to say that we have few writers, not J.K. Rowling or Harry Potter kind of book, but certainly we have few writers whose book gets sold every 10 second or 5
yeah,
second
yeah,
or fraction second. We have such stats available in our country. But at the same time, best of our fiction writers, and of course you are part of that community now, don't have that privilege.
no,
And
no,
being an insider of publishing world, that is my concern. That once I read something written by Amitav Ghosh, who happens
yeah,
to be a great admirer of your work as well, that that I don't have luxury being Chetan Bhagat or that kind of right. But I know he was saying something in different perspective. And he has that kind of fan followings. He has millions of fans, no doubt about it. But in terms of reach, somewhere there is a serious problem in our market, Indian publishing market, where
yeah,
the serious literary fiction is not getting the same traction like the popular titles. And
yeah.
most of our popular titles are trash. Another day, I was in Delhi Book Fair, and I was discussing on the matter why we are not being able to export our books to the world. And most of the speakers said that because we don't have that kind of products. Products mean we don't have that kind of contents. But
Yeah.
even at the same time, we have the best contents as well, parallelly. So I wanted to know how a writer's perspectives can be different from the editor, especially your personal take on this.
So the the editor has to think about the reader. That's the first thing I would say.
Yes.
The only two people who really matter, the writer
Hmm.
and the reader.
Hmm.
Everybody else is dispensable, right? You have the in books, the important people are the writer and the reader. So everybody else, the editor, the designer, the marketing person, we are there to facilitate this exchange between writer and reader, right? We want
Hmm.
the writer to get the largest possible readership and the best possible readership, and we want the reader to have the best possible book.
Yeah.
So writers, especially so-called literary writers, ideally you don't want them to think too much about readers. You want them to just try to make the book the best they can.
Hmm.
Where the editor comes in is to say, okay, I'm representing the reader here and saying, I think that this part of the book is too long. I think that this here your meaning is not clear. That sort of thing. The other thing is that obviously publishers have to make commercial decisions, right? So we have to project, forecast what kind of audience we think is out there for a book. And as you just outlined, it's depressing, but it's true. The audience for serious fiction is small, and it seems like it's probably shrinking. It certainly shrunk over
Yes.
time. So
Yes.
compared to 25 years ago, let's say 23 years ago, when
Hmm.
Arundhati Roy's Border Small Things came out, in the mid 90s, you had Rohinton Mysteries, A Fine Balance. You had Vikram
Yes.
Chandra's Love Longing in Bombay. You had Kiran Desai.
Become a suitable boy, a
You had
suitable.
Vikram Seth, Suitable Boy. You had Amitabh Ghosh's Shadow Lines, and then
Pankaj Misra's novels.
Pankaj Mishra's The Romantics.
Romantic.
Those books, I mean, so the so there's a question is what happened to the audience, and a lot of them are watching Netflix, watching Amazon Prime, and I'm talking about the audience for serious fiction here, not the people who are reading the books that you describe as trash.
Hmm.
A lot of people who used to read serious fiction are reading less serious fiction. The audience is getting smaller, and I think this is unambiguously a bad thing. I don't think that you look. Patal Lok may be a great TV show. Made in Heaven may be a great TV show. It's not a substitute for
Yes.
reading.
Yes.
It's two totally distinct forms of entertainment or art or whatever. And as a culture, we are losing out from the assumption that TV shows are a substitute for reading. They're not. But that's what's happened really, is that the biggest change is the rise of streaming, and that it's social media plus streaming, and people who would otherwise read are now spending their time on Facebook or watching Netflix.
Yeah, it seems
Yeah.
there is a dichotomy, before dot-com crisis in 2000.
Yeah.
There was a prediction that we no longer will have the books, physical
Yeah.
books in the world.
Yeah.
But the fact remains that every year now more titles are being published in Indian
Yeah.
market, especially.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Now the Indian publishing market has a size of over $2 billion per year.
Yeah.
Before COVID-19, I will not count this year's figure because this year everything is trouble.
Yeah.
But there is a contradiction. I mean, while the serious leadership is shrinking, we are publishing more titles. So somewhere the whole game out is more about the trade now. Publishing is
Yeah.
very much trade, and it's not a bad thing because it's also part of livelihood creation for many of us.
Yes.
Uh,
That's yeah.
your book, Keshava, as a reader, as an early reader of your book, and also I had gone through many reviews, very
Yeah.
positive reviews, optimistic reviews about your writing. Somewhere, my personal gut feeling is that you have deeply dwelt with globalization, the pulse of
Yeah. Yeah.
globalization.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
most of your critics so far have failed to comment on that part because
Yeah.
although they have covered nicely about the characters, places, why Harry Potter became the single region of interconnectedness, etc. I want to know because now we have entered into a phase where India is moving towards Atmanirbharta, that is
Yeah.
self-reliant, and somewhere it is protectionist measure. I don't know
Yes.
where we will move up with this because we can't afford it simply in practical terms. So
Yeah.
I want to know your perspective on this as well, that how
Yes.
we will cope with the new
Yeah.
challenges.
So that's such a thank you so much for that question, Atul. You're absolutely right. And in terms of the reviews of the book, the reason for this is that most people who review fiction are not, I think, very comfortable talking about ideas. They're more that their training is more
Characters
enables
and
more to talk
places.
about characters and
Mhm.
sort of thing. So I felt the one thing that disappointed me about the reviews of the book was that I felt that the ideas were not being engaged with. You can say you can engage with them critically, but
Mhm.
engage with them, right? I thought the reviews were all either about the characters or about Harry Potter, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
the book is absolutely deeply concerned with globalization. Absolutely.
Yes.
I personally have a very positive view of globalization.
Yeah.
Let's in different aspects. So
Mhm.
the first is this, that let's take the you brought up Atmanirbhar Bharat. It's a very good, very important point here. If you look at the economic history of the world since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution in the late 18th century, the dominant phenomenon is something called divergence. The per capita incomes of the industrialized world, the West, later Japan, Australia, and what's now called the global South, Africa, South Asia, until recently China, were on two different trajectories, right? And the only time since industrial times when we've seen convergence, that is, the West catching up with the West, is since 1990. And so it absolutely, when I see leftists in the West attack globalization, what that tells me is that they don't care about us. They don't care about the third world or about the global south. Because the central fact of if you look at the last 30 years from an economic standpoint, there's a central negative trend, which is accelerating climate change. I mean, from a human standpoint, right? But there's also a positive trend of convergence. Global inequality has actually fallen. Inequality
Yeah.
has gone up within societies, but globally,
Yes.
the rise of people out of poverty in China, in Vietnam, to an extent in India, in Bangladesh, we should be celebrating this. I mean, Bangladesh is a case of a pure globalization success story.
Yes.
It's a country that has followed the export-led model, and so I think the backlash against globalization is very dangerous. I think that those of us who want India to do well, want third world countries in general to do well, should not embrace this idea of protectionism, right?
Yeah.
On the cultural side, right? Globalization is when globalization is also cosmopolitanism. You what do we oppose globalization to? Nationalism, ethno-nationalism, appeals to tradition, pettiness, narrowness, right? So look at the statement that was made today by the chief minister of UP about what will happen to people who marry across religious lines, right? So globalization is the optimism of globalization is I can be friends with anybody, I can fall in love with anybody, I can eat any kind of food,
Mm,
and cultures will mix and merge as they always have. Cultures are always formed through globalization, right?
yeah.
That's how interesting things happen. So the book is definitely a kind of nostalgic for a time when globalization was at its peak, and
Mm,
now we're in an era of backlash. I hope it doesn't last. I hope that we come to our senses and realize that yes, there are negative aspects to globalization. Yes, there are negative aspects to some trade deals, but
mm.
positive aspects vastly outweigh the negative aspects. And if we can correct and find a better form of globalization, that's where we should be going.
Yeah, I second your thought, Keshava. I really think that absolute deprivation is really falling down, no doubt about it.
Yeah,
But there is case of relative deprivation, which is growing
yeah,
up in our
yeah,
society.
yeah.
But we can't negate it because we feel grow that has to happen somewhere. In
Yeah.
1991, when we had started the process of globalization, it was resisted all along, across
Yes,
even across the ideological lines.
yes, that's right.
Not only leftists in our part of the world, even rightists opposed it, and everyone
Absolutely.
said that we are going to be finished in that few years.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
fortunately today we are interacting on the stream yard, all thanks to 1990 the experiment we had done in 1991,
yeah,
and the full decade and even the next decade we had lots of success stories. Look on now, what kind of success stories we are getting from our country.
yeah,
We
yeah,
all are concerned with something which is happening here. So, and as far as the critics' dilemma or not getting too deep into the book or between the lines, I
yeah,
think in our country there has been no culture of literary theory. We are never known to produce literary theories,
yeah,
unlike the Western world. So
yeah,
there is our limitation, but still we have our advantages as well, because we have still many of us are still reading, many of us are still
yeah,
keeping belief in
yeah,
reading, the virtue of reading.
yeah,
Here I want to know of the next thing, which is on a slightly different line.
yeah,
Indian publishing market is the largest in South Asia. We quite often talk about regional and sub-regional cooperation in our subcontinent. Of course, Pakistan is a disputed territory, a troubled territory.
yeah,
Through all means, we can't deny it. So, but surprisingly, even many Pakistani writers, top writers, are getting published in India,
yeah,
and they
yeah.
are preferring India over any other market. I want to know where there is any whether you see any chance where Indian publishing market can be called a regional publishing market for South Asia, and that will be a positive Atmanirbharta, I think, make in India, make for South Asia kind of
No,
experiment.
you're right. It is. It is already. I mean, it's true that Delhi is the English language publishing hub
Mm.
for South Asia.
Yes, yes.
Now, one concern is that over the last since the Pulwama attack, right, the situation
Hmm.
has slightly changed. So it's much harder now for us to do business in Pakistan, and that is a concern. That the relations between India and Pakistan are at their worst for a long time. So that is definitely a concern. The so one of the look the one of the reasons why India became a publishing hub for South Asia is that we had the multinationals in India, right? So Penguin, which is now Penguin Random House, HarperCollins, Hachette, etc. Their South Asia operations are based
Yeah.
out of Delhi, and it's very encouraging. In the old days, there was a until very recently actually you had a colonial system. So the South Asia was part of the Commonwealth. The British publisher would export books to all over the South Asia. Now we finally developed the Indian subcontinent as a market. The only issue is that compared with India, these markets are still quite small
Yes.
because Sri Lanka, English is spoken widely, but it's not. It's a small country. It's not a big book market.
Yeah.
And Nepal, Bangladesh,
Very
Pakistan,
small market. It's very
the
small
English
market.
language book market is not a big market. So for the English, so when we publish in India, we don't actually factor in those export sales as an important consideration because we don't. It's not yet financially. So it's actually it works the other way around. So as you say, if you're a Pakistani writer, you might sell Moni Mohsen. You might sell
Yeah.
more copies in India than in Pakistan because of the size of our
Yeah.
English language.
Mohsin Hamid, so many, Raja
Yeah,
Rumi, so
exactly.
many
Faizan
people.
Ahmed, the Mohammad Hanif,
Ishtiaq Ahmad, so many people have
absolutely.
got published.
But I'm not sure. The only the only my only worry on that front is that you mentioned part of this, shall we call it cultural atmanirbharta, is that you know this much better than I do, Atul, but we Indians just not interested in our neighborhood. It's a
Yeah.
it's a scandal. These are the
Yeah.
countries that are these are the countries that are most relevant to us, and we
Yeah.
have such a position of cultural arrogance towards Nepal, towards Bangladesh,
Bhutan is.
and we just have to get over it. There's some excellent writers, outstanding musicians, coming out of these countries, and instead of engaging, we're not interested.
Yes. Yeah. Completely agree. Completely agree. I will cite you an example of Nepal.
Yeah,
Recently, I tried getting a book published with one of our top publishers,
yeah,
and they were very much interested to publish it. And the title was from Nepal, somebody
yeah,
very well-known writer. Otherwise, everyone one would like to publish her. But
yeah,
they cited a case that we don't have the good facility of logistics. We are not sure where the relationship turns bad or worse or go
yeah.
worse. Because in recent times, we have seen even with Nepal, our relationship has been on roller coaster.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
so we don't have command on even Nepal.
Yeah,
Command in the sense that in terms of responsibility bearing, because Nepal
yeah,
being our closest neighbor, and we have
yeah.
open border with that country,
That's right.
and we also share socio-cultural closeness, which is unique in
Absolutely,
the world. So there is a
absolutely.
problem. Although lots of Nepali writers are getting published, have been getting published in India. Manjushri Thapa, Samrat Upadhyay, Pranay Rana, so many people, Geta Rana, and so many others. But somewhere there is concern. Concern is
Yeah.
sure. My next question
Let me
is
just, Atul,
related to
let me just put a
books
light on.
again.
Just give me a second. I'm just going to put a light on.
Yes. Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah. Sorry, your next question. Yeah.
No, no. So welcome with the light. Thank you.
Yeah.
Uh, where do you see the future of books? It's a very small question, but I want a detailed answer from you.
Right. So the encouraging trends are one you actually mentioned, which is that physical books have not been physical books are still thriving. So the um, ebooks, those people who read books never really took to ebooks. So they still prefer physical books. See, I am broadly still optimistic. I don't think this is a great period, particularly for fiction, but I'm broadly optimistic because for two reasons. The first is I believe in novels as a form. I don't believe that novels are an outmoded form because I think that there are some really unique things which novels do. One is that it's only novels or short stories, but I mean it's only the written word that allows us to explore inner life. When we write fiction, we're not just telling stories, right? We are historians, filmmakers. None of them can explore what's happening inside somebody's head, what's happening inside somebody's soul. So the inner life is the unique preserver of fiction. And that to me is why fiction will not die. The other thing that's unique about fiction is its variety. You can do anything. In a 300-page novel, you can explore any subject, any theme, in any style. You can include philosophical essays. You can go deep down into some into it's a scientific details of genetics, and these two qualities I think will stand fiction in good stead. But the other thing that I hope is eras often generate backlashes. So the kind of capitalistic, individualistic in the West, Reagan Thatcher era followed from kind of the hippie era and the counterculture. Uh, we're now seeing that we had the era of globalization. Now we're having the era of backlash, the era of nationalism. So I'm hoping that this era, this Instagram era of a million distractions, a million images, everything fast, everything in your face. I'm hoping that because, see, what do we know about the number one thing we know about social media? This, by the way, is incontrovertible. The evidence points in one direction: is it's not making us happy; it's making us unhappy. It's making us more anxious, more depressive, more suicidal. It's terrible for our attention spans. So, I, you know, I'm hoping that once this era generates its own backlash, fiction, which is slower, contemplative, has space for you to stop and think that actually it might have a comeback. Now, the people have been talking about the death of the novel for a long time. So I'm hoping that doesn't happen. One last point on this: the current trends, the two very strong current trends. One is towards non-fiction, from fiction towards non-fiction. So 30 years ago, serious books in India were mostly fiction. Today, it's dominated by non-fiction. History, politics, that kind of thing.
Yes.
The other, and this was kind of a necessary correction. This had to happen to some degree. It might have gone too far, but it had to happen. The other thing, and this to me, this I think is not so good, and this links to your point about the bestsellers and how the more books are published every year. If you look at the 10 best-selling books in India, I think last year, so one of them, number 4 and number 5, was *Sapiens* by Yuval Harari. The other 9 were all self-help books of some kind. So they might have been spirituality, they might have been weight loss, but they were basically in that self-help category. So people are buying a book because they think that it's going to give them something of tangible material value. It'll help me get a job, it'll help me improve my vocabulary, it'll help me become more productive. And that's fine, but I think that we have to come back to the idea that actually books have other purposes, right? They are about a broader sense of being educated. They're about helping us understand ourselves, making life more worth living, all of that. So this transactional idea of I've paid 200 rupees for the book, am I getting my best vasool? When you books, I just want to say this, Atul, books are incredibly cheap. A paperback costs less than a pack of cigarettes.
Exactly.
It probably costs the same as a cup of coffee at Starbucks. If a family of 4 goes to a multiplex and they buy popcorn, they buy cokes, and they watch a movie, they can buy 3 hardback books of non-fiction for what they're spending.
Yes.
And people complain about the price of a book. When you buy a book, you can keep it for decades, and every book deserves to be or every good book deserves to be reread. So books are incredibly cheap.
Yes.
Compared to other things that people spend their money on, but people continue to complain about the price of books. So as publishers, as writers, I don't think we should go along with this idea. We should have, it's a little bit like in the West, Indian food is associated with eating a cheap lunch buffet, right? And we don't have the pride to say that our food can be great food, can compete with the food of any country. So I think that as publishers and as writers, we should say, and we should say with confidence, that what we are giving you is something of value, and something that will add something to your life. Not just a commodity.
Yes, there is no scope for there is no scope for cost comparison because it's a staple thing. It's a staple like food or anything else.
Yeah,
And we certainly can't have transactional view about buying a book, reading a book. That
exactly.
instant gratification. I will read certain numbers of book for if I
Yeah,
don't need certain instant
yeah,
gratification. I will not read book. It's
yeah,
about
yeah.
having both tangible and intangible values. Also,
Absolutely.
also we should not ignore the fact that the books both fiction and non-fiction, especially fiction, have a very long shelf life,
Yeah,
very
yeah,
very long shelf life. We still keep our Shakespeare's books in our home,
that's
and,
right.
and
That's
and we
right.
are going to do that. We are going to do
Yeah,
that. Doesn't matter what will happen in future.
yeah.
So and not necessarily we can say that 100% of population is going to follow the same trend, but
No, of
and
course.
never it was, and always there was a community of readers, and it's going to be. So sir, somewhere I'm optimist on that, and that the books are
Yeah,
going to stay.
I hope so. Yeah,
Future is bright, very very bright. Till few years back, we did have publishers like KLF, Juggernaut, Speaking Tiger, and our tribe is growing up somewhere. So I'm in India, especially. I see many things very promising now.
yeah, yeah. No, you're right. You're right.
Yeah. Last, before we'll come towards the end, I have one more question related to the same aspect, other way around. If the readers keep transactional view about the books, then we also see the publishers keeping ROI factor in their mind, return
Yeah,
on
yeah,
investment.
yeah,
Somewhere it is not bad or misplaced because it is very much required. They are into the business of the books, so
yeah,
that is a legitimate concern. But there has to be a proportion. Sometimes they discourage fiction titles,
yeah.
and they give preference to non-fiction, undue preference to non-fiction titles. Why not? There can be a balancing act.
That the key is the word you just used, balance.
Hmm.
So there are two sort of opposite views, right? So one is you're in publishing to make money, or the other would be you're making money so that you can keep publishing, right? So the idea is to ensure that you can keep publishing the books that you want to do, and therefore what you need to have is balance. There are some books that you do because ROI, as you put it. There's a readership for the book, and it's guaranteed. But there are other books that you just feel deserve to be published, and we have to strike that. I mean, all publishers have to strike that balance. And I think broadly they do. You see a balance across the list. But if we go too far towards one side, that'll be a real shame. And you're right
Yeah,
that actually the risk right now is that it's going too far towards nonfiction. Yeah.
you're working on the next book. Okay, so briefly, can you give us an outline about it?
Well, all I'll say is it's another novel. It's totally unrelated to the first book, and it's set in Delhi. So the first book was set in the
Okay,
US. This book is set in
okay,
Delhi, which is where I've lived for the last several years, and
yeah.
set in contemporary India. So like at the moment, basically.
Are you keeping politics aside of your book
Well, it'll be there somewhere, but
somewhere?
it won't be at the forefront. Yeah,
Okay,
but
okay,
society,
understood.
what's happening in society, definitely
Yes,
is yeah. So yeah, we
because
can
we
take
keep,
questions if there are any from the
yeah,
audience.
yes. Sitansuji, can you please share the questions? Ye- There are few observations, in
These are
fact.
all just compliment
There's
comments.
very kind observations.
Yeah, this is a
Rajan,
comment from Rajnan.
Rajanandani Sinha. Yes, she's writing case. I cannot agree more. I completely agree with your submission. Serious fiction readers have shrunk over the years. Thank you,
Yeah,
Rajanandani. Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you. Keshava, do you have any set of suggestions for the budding writers? Because this is the question you can't evade. Because wherever you go, people will ask you,
That's right.
"What do you say
So
about the new writers?"
yeah, I have three suggestions that I tend to give when people ask me this question. If I'm speaking to students, or the first is you have to read. There are people who come to me and say that they want to be writers, and when I talk to them for 30 seconds, it's clear that they have no interest in reading.
Yeah.
If you are not a serious reader, you will never be a good writer.
Yeah.
You can't. Reading is how you improve as a writer, and so that is the first thing I would say is reading is really important.
Yeah.
As the old cliche goes, write the books that you want to read. The second piece of advice is that this is not a profession that you should get into with the view of making money. I would love it if you make money, but the vast majority of writers, myself included, are not making a living from writing, or we're
Yes.
making part of a living from writing, but
Yes.
not a full
Not
living from.
entirely. Yes.
Yeah. So there are a small handful of writers who can make their living from writing. But the third, and maybe the most important, well, along with the thing about reading, is you have to have a lot of patience, right? So that's, I mean, this is, there are a few people out there. There's an Arundhati Roy who strikes gold first time out, but most writers, myself included, have to deal with a lot of rejections, lots of ups and downs, and the key is to just remember why you're doing this. You're not doing it because you want to make money. You're not doing it because you become famous. The reason you're doing it, most of us are doing it, is because we have an illness.
Mhm.
We have a compulsion. If we were rational, we would be doing something else. We'd be investment bankers. But we have this compulsion that we have to write. And
Yes.
if you're really patient, then eventually, hopefully, things will work out for you.
Yeah, completely agree. In addition to what you have rightly said, I think that reading is a painful process and it's very isolated process as well. You have to
Yeah.
live in isolation for a long, long time. But nowadays, the young writers are tempting towards getting byline quite early. They don't observe a fact that our finest writer in non-fiction, we have some of the best writers in the world living here in our time. And Amitabh Ghosh had written his first novel at the age of 36.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
Shadow
Yeah.
Lives he published when he was 36.
Yeah.
And Pankaj Mishra had destroyed seven novels before publishing his first one,
Exactly. Exactly.
Romantic.
Yeah.
So earlier, 30 years back, our finest writers were not tempting towards just getting published. But
That's
now
right.
the trend is reversed. I also see a major reason that a lot of literature festivals are going on here and there, including KLF and JLF, and they are contributing very positively towards creating the momentums. So somewhere these literature festivals are now these are happening through on
Yeah.
virtual platform
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
helpful to some extent, but
Yeah.
filtration is also needed somewhere. And
Yeah.
then then you see the scope of literary consultants. In our part of the world, the term is not so much in practice, but now people are getting educated about it. Many publishers I know who are now not accepting the books until unless someone is endorsing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
As
Yeah.
a publisher, what is your views about this particular trend, that
Yeah. So
growing
that's
interest
right.
to write more and more, and the room for literary consultants?
So very often, every day almost, I'll get a submission from someone who has some talent, but they're not ready yet. They haven't put in the effort on their own book to where it's worthy of being published. So you're right. Comes back to what I said about patience. You have to be, if you have to take a long-term view. On your second point, look, we at Juggernaut don't have any such rule, so we often deal with authors directly. I do feel that if a literary agent is a good agent, I have an agent. Most writers do. A good agent is a worthwhile thing for a writer, especially a fiction writer, to have. Now, I have a British agent. There are a few agents in India, but only a small handful of good agents. So it's not easy for every writer to that. I mean, the last thing I'll say about this is that there's a real problem of lack of information. I think probably as publishers, we need to do a better job. Maybe we could even collaborate and put together guides on how these processes work. Because for writers who are starting out, they often don't know whom should I approach, how should I approach them. A lot of the emails I get from writers are they have found letters online, like how to pitch an agent letters online, and they've just copied the letter and they've just added the name of their book and all of that. So I think what that shows to me is that people don't actually know how to approach these. People feel quite intimidated and they don't know how to approach these processes. Yeah.
Yeah. This year has been very difficult. Not many books are being published, not many books are
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
launched, and a
Yeah.
lot of writers I know are very upset with what's happening now. So, do you think until we meet again, and we'll end our discussion very soon here, would like to know something on optimistic note
Yeah.
about the publishing scene next
You
year?
know,
Possibly, we
yeah.
yeah should be better for us.
So what's interesting, Atul, is that there are some countries, the big markets, the UK, US, where actually the publishing industry has done pretty well this year. It hasn't been hit in the same way that we have in India. So what happened in India is twofold. The first is that as a poorer country, people this hit to people's disposable income was much greater because the government did not have a fiscal in the West, in Britain, in Europe, and the US. There was fiscal stimulus that largely covered people's incomes. In India, this didn't happen. So people cut back on spending, including books. But the other thing was that there was a very unfortunate decision taken by the government from the perspective of the publishing industry. Because in the initial lockdown, which started in March and went on through May, really, Amazon was not allowed to deliver books. And
Yes.
when people were sitting at home and they had so much time to read, it just tells you that the people making policy do not care about books or about publishers at all.
Yes.
Because 2 months people were sitting at home, they had so much time to read, and they were not allowed to order books. And Amazon's allowed to deliver groceries. Why shouldn't they be allowed to deliver books? But we don't think
Mhm.
of books as being an essential commodity because we don't value books. So
Mhm.
that was very sad what happened, right? Today,
Mhm.
the Amazon business is picking up, the brick and mortar bookshops have been hit. But I hope, I'm hopeful for next year. I think that it might take 2 years to come back to where we were last year. But I don't see any reason why the appetite for books should be reduced. And if you look at it more optimistically, we're going to be working from home next year, right? We're going to be
Yeah.
working from home, a lot of us, until
Right.
second half.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. While the appetite will be there, no doubt about it, but I think that the response from the government, has been very weak about the publishing sector.
They,
Other day, I said
they
I
don't
was
care.
having the discussion on the same line. At
Yeah.
the same time, the onus is on the publishing sector as well because the sector has not created so much space for policy advocacy, like any other sector, automobile, anything, telecom, healthcare, education. So
Yeah.
even while being most of our publishers in MSMEs category, they are not getting the prescribed benefits. And
Actually,
what? Yes. Yeah.
I would say there was something. I've got one really optimistic point.
Hmm.
So what we did at Juggernaut, because we have an app, right? We also publish on our app. We
Yeah.
made
Mobile app.
we made our app free. When lockdown was
Mhm.
declared, we made every book on our app we made
Yes.
free.
Yes.
And what we saw was readership went through the roof.
Hmm.
And in particular from tier 2 cities, tier 3 cities, I'm not talking about Delhi, Bangalore, Bombay,
Right.
from
Yeah.
places like from
State capital, or district
even below
headquarters.
even below a
Zero.
state cap,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So from
Yes.
a Bareilly or
Yes.
uh,
Subdivision level.
yeah, so
Yes.
that kind of readership, or a Gorakhpur. So we were
Mhm.
seeing that also, and that again that tells you the readers are there. There are
Mhm.
people who
Yes,
want
of
to read.
course.
We have to reach
That
them.
technology is helping us there, no doubt
Yeah,
about it. But with the balancing it, we will surely overcome the problems, and
yeah.
we can assume that the next year is going to be a promising one for all of us.
I hope
Thank
so.
you very much, Keso. Wonderful talking to you.
Thank you,
On
Atul.
Yeah,
Great pleasure. Thank you for great questions as well.
thank you. I will also give my heartfelt thanks to the organizers of KLF Kalinga Literature Festival, especially Rasmi Ranjan Paridaji, Sitansuji, and Asutosh. Thank you very
Thank
much, all the participants, for being with us. Thank you very much.
thank you. Thanks, Atul.